Are we looking at a blip from Oscar Piastri then? Is this an anomalous circumstance, or do you think the pressure might be getting to him his third season only in F1?
No, I don't think the pressure's getting to him, and I think he's still the calm blackjack Brabham type driver we've been talking about all year. However, there's a difference between a street circuit and the preparation of a race on a street circuit to, say, I don't know, British Grand Prix at Silverstone. And I was struck actually on Friday morning when he had that problem. I think it was a hydraulic problem with the car, and he wasn't going out. Admittedly, the track was green at that point, and but nonetheless, it's a street circuit. You want to get into a street circuit very quickly, and you want to get into a groove. And there he was standing on the pit wall in the garage, and I was just struck by him not actually looking very annoyed. I mean, not annoyed, but he didn't look as if he was just the usual, happy, laughing Oscar. He realized that this was valuable time that was being lost. I think that's what he felt. And it was kind of mitigated then by that long delay when I think the curb started to break up, and there was a long delay. And by the time that was over, he was up and running again. So that it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But then, was he playing catch up after that? It's going a little bit too quickly, too soon. On street circuits, always you let the circuit come to you, as we saw with, Max on Friday wasn't out there setting fastest times. And the grip picks up almost, by the lap, by the time you get to the weekend, putting aside the drizzle and the grease and the crosswinds. And so he got out of sync, I think, with the build up of the grip. And then there was that, weird thing where on the grid, I mean, putting aside at the back of the field, the two McLaren drivers were the only two on the brand new mediums. And it's so easy to say it, and people will say, "Oh, Windsor, typical, Monday morning quarterback or whatever." But when you've got a car as good as a McLaren, and it's going to be good on time management, it's going to be good in terms of balance and feel and general chuckability on a circuit like that, and you've got both your guys in the midfield. For me, the last thing you would do is put them on the softer tire, new sets thereof. Because the only thing you can do when you start them like that is basically you're saying to them, even if you're not saying to them verbally, you're saying to them subliminally, make the most of it off the line on the first few laps, get past these cars, get to the front of the race. That's what a new set of mediums actually says when you put them on the car, when they make that decision. For me, I would have said hards, absolutely for sure, for both of them, because the safe way to pick up track position, if you've got a very, very good car, always is to extend the stint. And they went for new sets of mediums. I think it kind of, Lando is not a driver that responds to that sort of thing anyway. He's not that sort of driver. Oscar is, he's pretty aggressive and he's a racer. And we saw that, obviously, overdid it at the start, I guess, just so psyched up in wanting to make a great start, anticipating the lights going out. And then past two cars, I think, before he went off, he's on the outside of Ocon going into a slow corner. And he used the phrase, I think he outbraked himself or did something like that. But the reality is that even a new set of mediums is not going to be fully up to tire temperature. And he got the other two cars going down the inside or just on acceleration runs. This one, he's on the outside. It was quite windy anyway. There's quite a lot of debris on the outside. If he'd been on hards, I think he would have said, right, just back off, just let everything settle down. But because he's on the new mediums, he's got to go for it. Obviously, the tires went up to temperature, locked the inside, and straight off, virtually the same sort of shunt as he had in Q3. So, terrible weekend. But in answer to your question, I think it's all bracketed by a street circuit in Baku. Now, it's not to say it couldn't happen again on another street circuit like Singapore, which is the next race. And if he misses the first half hour of Q1 and the weather's terrible for whatever reason, torrential rain or whatever, which you can have in Singapore, then it could all go wrong again. And McLaren just looked clumsy, didn't they? Compared with a lot of teams, they didn't look as if they really knew what they were doing when all the variables came into play and you had to choose what tires you wanted your guy on. I mean, they had Lando on. Where are we? I'm just going to look at this. Yeah, they had Lando on softs after running mediums in Q2, and then they put him on softs for Q3. Now, this is Lando Norris, and you think, well, that's no problem. But when it's when it's very frenetic like that with a lot of reds and there's a crosswind and it's raining a bit, you want to try and keep the driver, you want to give the driver as much confidence as possible, obviously. And I thought it was quite interesting that Max was basically on the medium the whole way, apart from running the softs for a short run in the Q1. He was basically on the medium, which gave him a feel for the car on mediums. And yeah, he did the time on softs at the end, but really because he ran out of mediums. And I think he still would have been on a medium had he had the opportunity. And the only reason he actually got the pole was because he's just so good at managing all the variables, and it showed up in his driving. And he got it even on a set of softs, you could say. But with Lando, they didn't need to do that. They could have been more consistent, I think. And he didn't qualify well. And I know we want to talk about Lando, but we might as well talk about it, and then what a race. Just
unbelievable.
Really.
Let's just finish double clicking on Oscar first.
Yeah.
I thought initially that sometimes you've got to extend a driver who's only in his third season in F1 some grace, and particularly since he's been Mr. Consistent seasons to date, and even going back further into 2024, you can do one of these, Mr. Windsor. You can chalk that up to the game. This happens. F1 drivers are human beings, and therefore they make mistakes. But then you see 2 days. 2 big incidents. Now, McLaren guys are saying that that's the first time they've ever seen Oscar Piastri take a corner off of his car, but he did it in back-to-back days. And not only that, Peter, in the race, he's made the full start. Now, if you've got anything about you, you'll be aware you're going to make a full start and get a 5-second penalty, but don't ease off or anti-stall and end up in P20. That's 2 mistakes back-to-back. And then he's yeeted it into the barrier again. I'm like, this is a difference in extents that we're speaking about as far as Oscar's errors of the unforced variety now and not kinds. That's incredible that he's done that. Some are speculating, Peter, that potentially it's on the back of him not being too pleased at the previous Grand Prix when McLaren asked him to invert. What do you make of that?
Well, on the way he reacted to the start, I don't think you can criticize what he did, because the millisecond in which he released the clutch too early and realized he had, the natural reflex is just a brake. And so I don't think you can criticize him for that. I mean, if he'd kept going, he would have been past the pole man by the time the lights went out. So, I mean, you don't want to do that. I don't think you can criticize his reaction having made that error with the clutch. But as for the rest of it, I can see a lot of Oscar Piastri fans, a lot of Australian fans, all the rest of it saying, well, it's only one race, give them a break, they all make mistakes. And that's absolutely true. And every driver makes mistakes all the time, really. And it's just that some make bigger mistakes than others. But the only thing you got to say above all of that is that he is in a McLaren. He's not in a Williams. He's not in a Ferrari. He's not even a Red Bull. He's in a McLaren. He is in the best car in Formula One. So even then, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't make mistakes, but it does mean, I think, that you got such a good race car that you don't need to do what Oscar was doing. You don't need actually to have to push that hard if you're not that comfortable, and you don't need to pass 4 cars on the first lap, even if that new set of mediums is your thing, your trigger to make you do that. And I think that's the point, isn't it? It's a very, very good car, the McLaren. And there's no doubt that had Oscar just kept going, even with the 5-second penalty, if he hadn't hit anything, he would have been what? I don't know, maybe third, probably. I would think might have caught Sainz.
Yeah.
So, all he had to do was just drive that thing well. And to me, it's still astonishing that Lando didn't do that. You could say, well, Lando didn't. But yeah, well, Lando didn't. What can I say?